Greetings. We are a little early. Oh, no, that's right. I forgot. My phone and my computer clock are different. Greetings and welcome. I am so excited to be here with you today to talk about ADHD and the 13 common challenges that may indicate that adults have ADHD. So let me start with first a very short introduction of me. I am Dr. Aku. I am known as the Inner Peace Doctor, and I do three things as the Inner Peace Doctor, all under the umbrella of cultivating inner peace. I am a speaker, and so I love going into businesses and to helping the staff become more aware of stress and how they can keep stress from becoming chronic stress, which becomes toxic stress, because stress interferes with productivity and it interferes with staff enjoying their job and enjoying each other. So I love going into businesses and organizations to help around stress management. The other thing I do specifically for Black women, I help Black women learn about how stress affects us individually and as a group. And so we have regular meetings, once a month, Saturday morning, free meetings, and some other offerings that are just for Black women. And last but not least, ADHD coaching. ADHD is near and dear to me. I am surrounded by people living with ADHD. My youngest child, a number of family members, and having neurodiversity myself as someone living with dyslexia, I understand the challenges of living with ADHD. And so this has become one of my areas of specialty. So I really enjoy helping people better understand and also find their superpowers. So my approach is very positive and superpower focused because so many people living with ADHD focus on all of the negatives. And the reality is, it's neurodiversity. It's about accepting who you are and finding the systems and the shifts in your life that make your life work as you embrace your superpower so that you can really shine the best you that you can be. So let's start with ADHD. Now, the technical name is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Who wants to have a disorder? Not I, right? And I don't think anybody else wants to have a disorder either. But that is the what those letters stand for. However, I like to focus on attention difference, hyperactivity difficulty. Right? Those subtle shifts in those words make it much easier to accept. We can all accept that we have difficulties, right? Nobody really minds having a difference, but who wants to embrace having a disorder? So I invite you to join with me in redefining ADHD as attention difference hyperactivity disorder. Something else that's important to understand is if you are like my age or older, then you may be living with ADHD and it may never have been formally diagnosed, or you may never have received that information, because we've learned a lot about ADHD in the past few years. And so, if you did not have the kind of ADHD where you were very hyper and had a lot of difficulty in school, you may be living with ADHD and have come up with some really cool ways to balance things out and compensate for challenges and may not even realize it. And so, you might be wondering, which is why I decided to talk about, 13 common challenges that might indicate adult ADHD. So we're going to navigate the unknown together here. We're going to go through 13 challenges. And then when I finish going through all 13, I will answer questions. If questions come up, please feel free to pop them into the chat and I will go back through after I finish and answer all the questions. That way, if you have to go early, you can watch the replay while I answer your questions. And I don't want you to forget your questions. So feel free as I'm talking to pop them into the chat. And then as soon as I finish going through all 13, I will circle around to the chat and answer any questions you have. That being said, let's get started with number one, right? A common challenge that might, and of course, I'm not diagnosing anyone here. And the reality is, whether you get a formal label or not, If you're having some difficulty with these challenges, I may have some things to help you. So it doesn't matter if you have a formal diagnosis. If you want some support, if you know that some of these things that I'm mentioning are really challenging for you, then let's talk about how you can get support because you don't need a label in order to get support if you're having challenges. So, number one challenge, difficulty with focus. Adults with ADHD often struggle to maintain attention on tasks, even those they find interesting, but especially those that they don't find interesting, right? So they may be frequently become distracted with unrelated thoughts. Now you say, okay, yes, everyone can get distracted. Everyone can get distracted, but getting so distracted that it's really hard to get things done, especially the things that then there's a whole group of things that we all have to do that we don't particularly like doing. And so when you find that this is such that you get so distracted that you're off, that you are trying to, and some of these things, yes, if you're tired, you might experience it more. If you are getting older, you might experience it more. So everything that I'm talking about is on a continuum. So what you want to look at is, do you have a lot of these 13 things? And are you on the extreme end of the continuum? But there's nothing here that I'm going to mention that doesn't happen to us sometimes. It doesn't happen to some people. So as I'm going through, I want you to think about that. Is this something that happens to me a lot? Or does it just happen every once in a while? Is this something, do I have a lot of these challenges or just one or two of these challenges? Because without actually talking to you, it would be difficult to say whether this is a likelihood. So I don't want everybody to watch this and then go away thinking that everybody has this challenge. We all have challenges. Everybody has some challenge. This may not be yours. It may be yours. Either way, let's give you some support. So difficulty focusing is number one. Number two is forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is a common symptom with adults with ADHD. A frequent forgetting appointments, losing items like keys and phones, having difficulty remembering important details. All of those things may be a sign, if you find that happening very frequently, that you have ADHD as an adult. Okay. Being disorganized is number three. Right? Chronic disorganization in various aspects of life. So, disorganization at work, disorganization at home, and personal life can be a sign that you have ADHD. So, difficulty keeping your things in order, even figuring out how to put them in order, may be a sign. This is not something that everybody with ADHD has, right? None of these things. And that's the way it is as humans. We're so complicated. No one that has any challenge, disorder, illness, has all of the symptoms, all of the same challenges. We are all unique individuals, but this is something that's very common, disorganization. So chronic disorganization where it's difficult to organize your thoughts, organize your things, may be a sign. Right. So this can lead to messy living spaces, missed deadlines, difficulty managing daily responsibilities. Right? But there are ways to help you get more organized. Um, Although I'm focused on all the challenges, let me give one quick tip right here. Right? For a disorganization, what I find is really helpful is putting a system in place. Everything needs to have a home, and to spend a little bit of energy getting used to putting things back in their home. And you'll find that over time, then you do it by default and it makes it much easier. So, keys are something so easy to lose. Making sure that you have by the front door, you have a bowl to put the keys in or a rack to put the keys in. And then, the first, as soon as you put it up there, that rack up or that bowl in, make sure for the first week, you're being very mindful of putting the keys in. Right? If you find that you walk through the house and you have the keys, go back and put the keys in. You will find that shortly that gets to be a rhythm. And then you'll come in and without even thinking about it, because you'll be focused on other things, without even thinking about it, your keys will be right there in the bowl or on the rack. So coming up with systems. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love doing, is helping people kind of figure out what systems work for them, making tweaks in the system so that the systems are sustainable, and really figuring out how to work with your unique mind. Okay, so let's keep going. Number 4, procrastination. Adults with ADHD have a tendency to procrastinate, often struggling to start or complete tasks until the last minute or under pressure. And this is an interesting one because you find, and again, anybody and everybody can procrastinate, but this gets to be kind of a chronic thing for adults living with ADHD. And it's about the motivation system. Right? Some of us are motivated by getting something done so we don't have to think about it. But very often with ADHD, it's the under pressure thing, right? That helps finally get the task done. So the procrastination is about creating this pressure, and it's the pressure that gives the motivation to get the task done. However, that often comes with a lot of other negative feedback, right? A lot of stress. And so, since my brand is cultivating inner peace, we're not trying to cause more stress. We're trying to help alleviate stress. So things by putting in a false deadline, breaking things up into smaller pieces and giving those things deadlines, pairing up with somebody to get some things done. There are lots of different systems that can help you reduce procrastination because procrastination itself can become now this background stressor. Even though you might be efficient in the moment and getting the thing done because you've got the pressure and the energy to do it, knowing that you procrastinate and waiting till the last minute, especially when it's a regular thing, can cause all sorts of stress in your life. So we want to alleviate that stress. Okay. Once again, number 4, procrastination. Let's move on to number 5, impulsivity. Impulsivity can lead to problems in relationships and decision making. Adults with ADHD may make hasty decisions without considering the consequences. Again, anybody might make some impulsive decisions. But when it's a frequent occurrence and you see that the consequences are not working out for you, then it's something to consider that impulsivity might be a symptom that's indicating or indication. I try to stay away from symptoms because then we're getting back to diagnosis as opposed to neurodiversity. This is just how your brain is wired. And so understanding that impulsivity is something to be aware of. And of course, we can put in stops for that. I encourage people to, before they make especially major decisions, to put in a pause, right? To create some kind of automatic pause for themselves. And it depends on the person and the situation, but there are ways to balance out impulsivity. But can also be something that makes you spontaneous and fun. So we want to find the ways to balance out the negative effects on these things, but understand that some of these challenges under certain circumstances are part of what make you so wonderful. So it's really about understanding, right? And making sure that we are using these things in the places and spaces where they work best and having ways to balance them in the places and spaces where they can cause more challenges. All right, let's keep it moving. Number 6, poor time management. Okay. Difficulty managing time effectively is another hallmark of ADHD. This can lead to lateness, chronic lateness. Again, anybody and everybody can be late. I live in New York City. The train stopped running. You have no control over that. But chronic lateness is a hallmark. So, lateness for appointments, difficulty estimating how long tasks will take. That is a good one, right? Time sense. And one of the first things that I'm approaching in my ADHD coaching program, the first thing that we're going to talk about in this group is time. Okay? Because time blindness is one of the big hallmarks and big challenges for people living with ADHD. Estimating how long something's going to take, because if you have many things to do in a day, and you have difficulty estimating how long something's going to take, you may have too many things on your plate in that day. So, how do you manage time? I think it's so important for people to understand time blindness. That's what we call it, and understand how that works. Because once you understand how something works, then it's a little easier to come up with systems to work around it. Like sometimes using alarms, can be really helpful. Using a timer, right? So if you can't estimate how long it will take to do something, you can literally, and we all can do this so easy now because we have smartphones, right? You can put it on your smartphone. You can use the timer function to time out how long it really takes you to do that task. And that gives you an accurate estimate. So you don't have to rely on um, estimating incorrectly. Like that would be me relying on how to spell something, living with my dyslexia. That's why I have a dictionary on my desktop. So that I can go to the dictionary when I'm not sure if a word has one T or two T's in it. I don't have to rely on my sense when that's not my strength. I can go to the dictionary and it can help me figure that out. Well, we have tools to help figure out around time blindness. Okay, number 7, restlessness. Adults with ADHD may experience a sense of restlessness, this internal kind of fidgetiness that may show up so that people can see it, but sometimes it can be more in, thoughts in an internal sense, right? The feeling the need to constantly move or fidget, even in situations where it's not so. It's probably not appropriate to fidget a lot at a funeral or something where people are all sitting still and solemn. So finding ways to help you to use that energy that's not disruptive to other people. Right? Those are things that can be done. And I find that a lot of adults, by the time they get to adulthood, especially if they have never been given a formal diagnosis, have come up with their own systems to do this. I know one woman that I worked with, when she'd go to something like a funeral, she'd wear a scarf and she'd play around with the scarf. It was quiet, right? So it was a little fidgety, and sometimes she'd have to like take it off her. Usually she'd wear it around her neck, and she'd be kind of doing a little bit of this with it. But if she found that people started looking at her, she'd just take it off and she'd put it in her lap, and she would move it around and tie it and untie it. But it was a way of doing something that was quiet that allowed her hands to fidget, that did not disturb people. And you may know now that there's so many fidget spinners and different things, devices now that are out to help. They're marketed mostly towards children and teenagers to help fidget, but you can come up with your own systems. Another person I know, she always wore bracelets, but the problem with bracelets is they can be very noisy. So she got some that weren't particularly noisy that she could spin around during things like that. So there are lots of things, and I find a lot of people, by the time they get to adulthood, have come up with some great compensations for many of these things. But sometimes they come up with compensations that aren't so great and need a little help perfecting them. And that's what I do. So moving on to number 8. Okay, I've been putting fingers up. So let me put some fingers up for number 8. Mood swings. One of the things that I found really interesting, as I don't know if I mentioned, I don't think I mentioned it today. I've mentioned it in other lives and in other places, that because my little one is has ADHD, and during COVID had such a difficult time emotionally. I was motivated to go to the Amen Clinic, and it's 50-hour course learning all about the brain and how things like ADHD work in the brain. And then after that, I dove in, both feet, everything, every conference, every book that I could find. And what I found most interesting was the emotional side of ADHD. So many people talk about the prefrontal cortex, which is the home of organization and executive functioning, and all of the executive functioning challenges that go along with ADHD. But there are also a lot of emotional challenges that can go along with ADHD. So emotional dysregulation is a common with adults with ADHD. They may experience mood swings, irritability, and difficulty controlling their emotions. And so better understanding of that and expectation, understanding this is just, again, this is just part of who you are. So when you know that, then you can find ways to help you balance things out, like regular exercise. Regular exercise helps increase the endorphins in the brain, right? Which is a great um, brain chemistry to help us stabilize our moods. So, there are ways to get around all of these things, but understanding that, and which is, I think, is a really important here, where people may not realize that these mood swings that they're experiencing might be related to ADHD, how empowering is that to understand that this is part of how you might be made up and that there are ways and things that you can do to help balance it out. Number 9. All right, which I kind of just mentioned this in number 8. Well, this is kind of the opposite of the emotion is the intellectual functioning. So challenges in intellectual functioning. So this includes planning, organizing, completing tasks, some of the things that we talked about a little bit before. Adults with ADHD might have trouble prioritizing tasks and following through on long-term goals. So figuring out how to break that long-term goal down into small pieces and following through. Challenges in executive functioning. Um, I like to think of the executive functioning. Imagine an orchestra, right? And there are all of these different instruments. There are the flutes, and there's the string section, and there are the percussion section, right? There are all these different instruments, and that's what's going on in our brains, right? We have all these different things to do. The executive functioning part, which I keep touching the front of my head because the executive functioning happens in the front, the prefrontal cortex of our brains. That is the orchestra leader, right? The person that is kind of saying, you guys come in now, then you guys come in, right? And if that part of the brain is not functioning optimally, then you're going to have clanging and banging and different parts of the orchestra coming in at different times. So there are many things that we can do to help the executive functioning part of the brain, which will help improve organization, improve planning, completing tasks. But that is one of the major hallmarks in terms of challenges that people living with ADHD have. Okay. Number 10, I get to use all fingers now. I don't know, did I do the 9 fingers for number 9? Don't remember. Number 10, difficulty in listening and following instructions. They have trouble listening attentively when people who live with ADHD and following multi-step instructions, which can impact performance at work and education settings. This is one of the first things before I totally figured it out with my little one. This was one of the first challenges that we noticed that even at 3 and 4, multi-step instructions was a challenge, right? And my little one is quite brilliant, quite creative, and incredibly funny. But and I have a tendency to give multi-step instructions. So this is one of those things that I've had to alter in order to support my little one is to not give a whole string and list. Okay, so I want you to do your homework, and then I want you to put your laundry away. Don't forget to put out the recycles, and then I want you to clean your room. Whew, way too much verbally. But what I do find is together, if my little one and I make a list of these are the things you need to do, and we tend to do that for homework, making that list either on the phone, we have a whiteboard where it can be wiped up, things can be checked off. That is more helpful than giving a verbal list of instructions. So being aware of this stuff so that you can find a system that works is so important. But understanding that if you're somebody that you realize that people give you 3 or 4 instructions and you heard the first and heard the last and that's it, then this might be an indication that ADHD is something you too are struggling with. All right, number 11. I'm going to stop using fingers now because I don't know sign language well, and I don't remember my sign language well enough to know how you say 11. And I only have 10 fingers, and I will fall off of my yoga ball if I try to put up toes. So let's just go with number 11. Chronic lateness. Um, Constantly being late for appointments. Didn't I say that already? Or social events can be a sign of ADHD. Individuals may underestimate the time needed to prepare and travel. Right. So again, this falls with the time blindness thing is that you think that it's only going to take you 30 minutes to get ready because you don't really understand how long this really takes. And so you don't allot enough time, and therefore you tend to be late. Number 12, relationship problems. Okay. Adults with ADHD may have difficulty maintaining relationships due to some of the challenges like forgetfulness, impulsivity, difficulty in listening, and also the emotional, the mood swings. So all of those things can be challenging in relationships. But what I find is that when your partner understands, right, and doesn't take these things personally because they understand this is part of the challenge, it's really helpful. It's really helpful. And then they can also appreciate more of the gifts that come with the ADHD so that they are not expecting things from you that are not your strong point. And that's, I think, the way it is in any relationship, um, that we are who we are. And, sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that when we marry people or get into a committed relationship, that things will change. People are who they are. So if your mate is forgetful, um, if they were forgetful when you got together, they're going to be forgetful 20 years into a marriage, probably more forgetful. So stop expecting them to remember and don't think, oh, well, if they loved me, they would remember, because that's just not how it works. If they loved you, they'd marry you. They did. Forgetfulness is part of the executive functioning, and it's not the same. So I think that's one of the challenges that can happen in relationships is that sometimes people attribute, the forgetfulness, the impulsivity, the difficulty in listening to lack of love. And and it may be things may have been different in the beginning because there's a honeymoon period, so there is higher motivation in those spaces. But then as we settle in, and this is the way it is in all relationships, it just may show up a little differently if we're talking about ADHD, and some of these challenges. But as we settle in, then some of these things that are challenges, become bigger. So, getting some support, help, again, education and understanding, and to not take it personally, to understand if this person is forgetful, to look beyond you, right? Is it that they're not only forgetful with you, they're forgetful all over the place. This is just part of who they are. And you don't have to put it all on yourself to fix it either. That's important for mates to understand, that it is not your responsibility to fix it, and that there's somebody like me that's out there to help support so that they can figure out better systems so that the pressure is not all on you. All right. 13, last but not least, and one that's probably the most challenging and really not, people really don't realize how this might be related to ADHD, but substance abuse, right? There is a higher risk of substance abuse among adults with ADHD, as they may turn to drugs or alcohol to cope with some of the challenges, right? And then that impulsivity might make it harder to move away from some of the drugs and alcohol. So, knowing that substance abuse, which is again not an excuse, but I think that when we understand how these things are related, it gives us more power to make changes. Not an excuse for it, but more power so that we can make changes about in the ways that are so possible so that you can improve your life. Okay. So I've done 13, and that was a lot. And now let me see if there are any questions. Let me, all right, comments. Here we go. Give me a second so I can figure out how to see this, because the technology is so much fun. All right. Okay. All right. I'll give people a minute to put any questions that they might have in. And while people are posting questions, I just want to say that it's so gratifying to support and help when people are challenged, to help them go from feeling afraid, fearful, and frustrated to having inner peace and being productive and peaceful around accepting their challenges. So, I invite you to go to my website. The website for ADHD coaching is CIP, which stands for Cultivating Inner Peace, the number four, ADHD.com. There, you can find out a lot more about the coaching program and more about me and my story. And you can sign up for a 20-minute free consulting call, so that you and I can talk more about whether I can offer you some solutions to the challenges you're experiencing. My program focuses on superpowers, right? The superpowers that you have, because again, nobody wants to focus on the negatives. Nobody wants to, see themselves as broken or having a disorder. So the first thing we do is a superpowers assessment. We look at all of the things, like creativity is a superpower that might be yours if you live with ADHD. Um, Hyperfocus is actually a superpower if it's pointed in the right direction. And there are quite a few others. So that's the first thing we do, is we look to see what your superpower is, because we can use your superpower to apply to your challenges. And you will feel so much better about you as you focus and learn that you have a superpower. So that's the first thing we do. Then we do that together. We also then come up with your goals list, right? And I help you make those goals realistic, and map out a plan together for how you will achieve those goals. And then the coaching program itself is a group coaching program, because I think it's so powerful to be with other people who also have the same challenge you do. So that being said, I don't see any questions at the moment, but feel free to send me a question if you have one. You can send it to drakhu.com, drakhu.com. Oh, sorry. You can send it to my email. That's not my email address. That's my website. My email address is drakhu@drakhu.com. drakhu@drakhu.com. If you have any questions, feel free to send them directly to me by email. I believe there's a way you can ask me questions from the website. I look forward to helping support you with your inner peace.